Okay, well, I am a retired U.S. Army colonel. I've spent 29 years in the U.S. military, and I also am a former U.S. diplomat. I was in the U.S. Diplomatic Corps for 16 years and served in countries such as U.S. embassies in countries like Nicaragua, Grenada, Somalia, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Sierra Leone, Micronesia. I helped reopen the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan in December of 2001 and was in Afghanistan for about 5 months, 6 months, and then ended up going to Mongolia. You might say exile to Mongolia. No, it wasn't. I volunteered. I volunteered to go to all of these places because I wanted to see what the U.S. was doing there. And some of you may say, well, why did it take you till 2003 to actually resign from the U.S. government? Weren't there some policies and programs that the U.S. government was doing during this period of 16 years that I was a diplomat and 29 years that I'd been in the military? And it's a very good question. How many of you all have ever served in any international organization or a national government or, you know, a big organization that you've kind of said, you know, this is going to be my career? How many of you ever, oh, come on. There's got to be a couple of people. Well, you know, for people who have kind of made up their mind that they're going to be a government employee, it's a difficult thing to finally resign, no matter what that government is doing, because you can always put the blinders on. And while you may know, and certainly I knew the good, the bad, and the ugly of what the U.S. was doing, but I could find programs and policies that I could work on that I felt were not the harmful ones. And, you know, I'm not a part of that war in Central America, or I'm not a part of this or that. When in reality, you are a part of it. You are a part of it by staying in the government. However, America does not have a rich tradition of resignation on principle. We don't have that. It's not one of those things that is taught in schools, you know, that if you really believe that a government is doing wrong, or a corporation is doing wrong, or a trade union is doing wrong, or, you know, whatever it is that you've been a part of. I mean, how often do we hear, do we tell our kids, you know, you ought to resign on principle. You really ought to, you know, there's something more important than working for that organization that you don't agree with or you think it's doing wrong. Well, that's where I was. And so for virtually my whole adult life, I worked for a government that now, since I resigned in 2003, I've spent the last 10 years, the last decade now. Can you believe it's been 10 years since the war in Iraq started? And that's where I resigned. I became one of only 3 U.S. government employees who ended up resigning on the Iraq War. Only 3. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't dissension within the U.S. government. All 3 of us that resigned, each one of us received over hundreds of emails. I received over 400 emails from colleagues in the State Department saying, what you are doing, your resignation is very important. This decision to invade and occupy Iraq is destructive for everyone. It's certainly destructive for the people of Iraq. They're going to you know, the havoc that the United States is going to wreak on the people of Iraq is going to be horrendous. And for the image of the United States, which was already in the toilet, it's just going to be flushed even deeper and deeper and deeper when we do that. But I've got kids in college, I've got mortgages, I can't resign. But there was a lot of dissension within the U.S. government on that decision to invade and occupy Iraq. That said, just the 3 of us were out there. Joining up with, as both of you all of you all have mentioned, the greatest mobilization of citizens of the world in challenging a policy that was going to happen that would involve the whole world. For the global war on terror by that time was 18 months old, where the world had come together to say, well, the attack on the United States was horrible. We support the people of the United States in trying to sort that thing out. But they didn't support invading and occupying an oil-rich Arab Muslim country that had nothing to do with 9/11 and had no weapons of mass destruction, that everyone except, it seemed like Colin Powell, George Bush, and Donald Rumsfeld, they're the only ones that kept saying they have it. And Blair, Tony Blair, yes. The coalition of the willing came very close, right behind them. But you all were out on the streets. You were in the biggest mobilizations in the history of the world. So after I resigned, it was, it was kind of interesting trying to sort out what I intended to do with my life. Here I'd worked with the government forever, and I didn't know anybody in a peace group. I mean, that wasn't, as a government employee, you don't necessarily know people in peace groups. Even though, in one way, the governments are supposed to be working for peace, but they certainly don't work with peace organizations. They only work with military organizations. So I was, eventually found a wonderful group of people and the network kept expanding. First, Veterans for Peace. U.S. military service men and women who have formed an organization that's now almost 20 years old called Veterans for Peace. And it is an international organization now. But that organization helped me connect with other groups, including a great organization called Code Pink Women for Peace. One of the, in the U.S., it's called kind of like a radical group, or by the media, it's called a radical group. But all it is a group of, started out to be just women who got in front of the White House and had, for 4 months after the Iraq War started, had a big mobilization out in front of the White House, and several women got arrested during that period. And they're kind of the heart of the anti-war movement in the United States right now, because as you all have indicated, even here in Ireland, it's been difficult over the last years to maintain the momentum after 2002 and 2003 with large mobilizations. It was easier for us in the United States when we had the evil George Bush. George Bush was a great person to rally against. And Donald Rumsfeld. I mean, we had the caricatures of evil that were out there, and we could mobilize hundreds of thousands of people. But with the election of the first African American to become president of the United States, and a man who ran on some pretty progressive policies, with the exception of what he was going to do to Afghanistan. He had some progressive ideas, and a lot of people got behind him and worked for him and got him elected. And then we've been sorely disappointed with what he has done, even though he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize within hours of his coronation as President of the United States for doing absolutely nothing, and then giving one of the biggest war speeches ever as his acceptance speech for the Nobel Peace Prize. It was astounding. And now where we have, his election really did pull the rug out from under groups that had been challenging U.S. imperialism. It pulled the rug out from under it, because here we have somebody that we thought we could work with. And a lot of people are unwilling still to this day, 4 years later, now going into the fifth year, the second term of Barack Obama, to really challenge him on his policies in Afghanistan, where he quadrupled the number of U.S. military that were in Afghanistan. But he did warn us during his campaign that he was going to increase the number of U.S. military, that the focus was going to go from Iraq into Afghanistan. Little did we know that he would become the president that would be called the assassin president. And as Patricia was mentioning, now we have President Barack Obama, who is using assassin drones, execution drones, in a country where the United States has never declared war. That in Pakistan, where the United States is assassinating by name, or they think by name, but the President of the United States every Tuesday gets a kill list. And he takes the list that's developed by the American intelligence agencies, 16 of them, who come together and decide What list should we give of names of people who are allegedly destructive toward U.S. interests, that could perhaps be harming U.S. interests, whether it's going after U.S. servicemen and women in Afghanistan or maybe in other parts of the world and they happen to be in Pakistan. But we'll go after them in Pakistan. So they give the list, and a small, as we understand it, a small little snippet about why this person should die, and die this week. And the President of the United States goes down the list and he starts ticking off the ones that he thinks should die this week. So now Barack Obama, first African-American president, elected by progressive groups, is now the president that is executing. He is the prosecutor, he is the judge, he is the jury, and he is the executioner. Last year, there were 48 drone strikes in Pakistan. Last year, there were about 150 people that were killed. We get the names of, we the citizens of the world get the names of the target person, and a little snippet about that target person. But then a couple of months later, we get the same name coming back up. Well, we missed him the first time, but those 10 people that we killed at the same time, we never get to know who the children are, who the families are. And when we have my country now that is targeting funeral parties, not only do we kill a person, but we wait around. We have our drones that are circling around, and we're waiting for the funeral. Well, first we wait for the rescuers, the first responders. And in the tribal regions of Waziristan in Pakistan, there are no ambulances. There are nothing like that. There are no mental health clinics that they send out people in white jackets that kind of help in car accidents or whatever it is. It's the people of the village that go to find what happened. What happened? We know something, a drone probably hit that, but we don't know why they killed the person in that house. But we have to go in and see if anybody is alive. And so people of the village come in and start clawing through all of the rubble. And then another drone is loitering above, waiting. And we send in another rocket, another Hellfire missile from a Predator or Reaper drone. And if we don't get enough people then we wait till the funeral later on that night. And then we target a funeral party. So the use of this drone now in not only Pakistan in the undeclared war done by the CIA, we have the U.S. military is conducting drone warfare along with the British military in Afghanistan in a declared war. Last year, there were over 450 drone strikes in Afghanistan. We don't hear anything about them. We have no